Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. I'm Farrah and I come to you from the great outdoors today. I tried filming inside a few times, it just didn't work out for other circumstances, so I'm out here on my walk. And today I'm going to share with you guys my favorite fiction books of the year. Now I'm going to kind of wing it. I forgot my list inside and this is not going to be in any particular order. It's just going to kind of be broken down into my favorites of each genre, if I can remember them. But yeah, we're going to go ahead and give this a whirl. So overall for the year, I read 65 books, which was the most books I've ever read in a particular year. So I'm going to keep the descriptions of each book pretty brief because I have videos on all of these and I'll link them all below, and just take my word for it. These are all really good. So if you're really interested in any of them, definitely check out the synopsis on Amazon or Goodreads and add it to your list for someday. So my favorite, I would say, literary fiction book of the year was a book called Migrations by Charlotte McConaghy. I think that's her name. And this book was absolutely amazing. It tells the story of Franny, who is an ornithologist, studies birds, and her journey down on a fishing vessel down to track the last remaining population of Arctic terns. So it's kind of like a little bit of an environmental dystopia in terms of most of the world's wildlife has gone extinct. We're in a little bit of the near future. And we're following her journey of tracking the final migration of the Arctic terns, which is one of the birds that makes one of the longest migrations in the animal kingdom. So it's a story about her own personal journey. It's a story about the environment, and I absolutely loved it. I loved it. So the next book on my list is going to be my favorite historical fiction book. And this one is called Four Treasures of the Sky. And this book had the most probably emotional impact of me on all the books I read the entire year. And this book follows this young girl who lives in China, and she's kind of thrown out to the streets as a 13-year-old. She has to learn how to survive, and she ends up getting drugged and kidnapped and smuggled across the ocean to the United States, where she is forced to work in a brothel. And her story goes on from there. But this was an incredible story of the human spirit and finding your identity and finding who you are. And despite all of life's obstacles, finding hope and finding friendship amongst the people that you're in these awful situations with. And this book brought me to absolute tears. This book was so moving. It took such a look at the Chinese discrimination in the United States during the 1800s, and it was just eye-opening to me, and it was so moving. It was one of my favorite books of the year for sure. Next, we're going to go with, I guess, my favorite children's classic of the year, and this one was Charlotte's Web by E.B. White, and this was just such a cute book. Oh my gosh. First of all, it was written in a way that an adult could absolutely enjoy it. I loved the way that E.B. White wrote his story and his prose, and it's just kind of like, it's almost, you can tell it's written for an adult to read to a child. But it was such a great story, a cute story of these barnyard animals that come together to help save each other. And, you know, it's a story about friendship and sacrificing yourself to help your friend. And it was so beautiful. I absolutely loved Charlotte's Web. Next on my list, I think we're going to do is my favorite horror book. And this book I'm going to pick for this one is going to be Ring Shout by P. DeJelly Clark. And this is a very short novella. It's a historical dark fantasy type of book, so there's magical elements within it. But it's a book about a group of young women, African-American women, who have this special power that they can see evil hiding within normal human beings, or what appear to be human beings. And they call themselves the monster hunters, and they hunt down these beings called Ku Kluxes, which are demonic entities that are hiding inside of human beings, and they feed off of the hatred and racism of others. And this book was absolutely amazing. First of all, the world building was incredible. The amount of story that was told within this short little book was incredible. The character arcs were amazing. It was such a satisfying and wonderful story, and I truly enjoyed it. And so that makes the pick for my favorite horror book. Next, we're going to pick my favorite graphic novel, and this one was Heartstopper by Alice Oseman. No shock, I'm sure, to anybody who has read it. This book was so cute and a beautiful look at the innocence of love and the innocence of a first crush. And it was so cute. I mean, I don't know what to really say except it was adorable and I absolutely loved it. I think we're going to do my favorite general fiction, and this one I'm going to give to The Reading List by Sara Nisha Adams. And this book was such a beautiful look at kind of found family and finding friendships in the most unexpected places. Friendships amongst different generations. So in this book, we're following Alicia, a 20-year-old girl who works in a library, and we're following Mukesh, who's in his 70s, an Indian American man who has just lost his wife. And they both come together through this reading list that they find at the library, and they become unlikely friends. And it's a story about how books bring people together, and the stories within these stories help people heal, and how these two unlikely people found each other and helped them through some really difficult times. It's a book about books, and I absolutely loved it. So next we're going to do my favorite romance book of the year, and this was called The Wall of Winnepeg and Me by Mariana Zapata. This tells the story of Vanessa, who is an assistant to Aiden, who's a pro football player originally from Canada, who has come to the US to play football. And his visa is running up, and he needs to find a way to be able to stay in the country. Vanessa can't stand him, but he offers her this amazing deal that she'll marry him so that he can stay in the country. So she agrees, and it's just a story of, it's kind of like not enemies to lovers, but it's a story about friends to lovers. It is a slow burn. It's a really, the sun's coming out. It's a really long book for a romance. It's about 600 pages, but she writes so well. The characters were so likable. It was such a slow burn, but it was realistic, and the payoff was so worth it. This was my favorite romance book I've ever read. I don't know what others are ever going to top this one, but yeah, I really love that one. So my favorite fantasy book, I'm going to give this one to The Sunbearer Trials by Aiden Thomas. And this book was incredible. I absolutely loved it. So this is like, think Percy Jackson meets the Hunger Games with a Mexican Aztec mythology twist to it. So we're following a group of young adults that are the children of gods and goddesses within this Mexican fictional land. And every 10 years or every 15 years, I forget what it is, they have to come together for this game where they have to play against each other on the 5 or 6 different trials, and whoever wins is the Sunbearer. Whoever loses has to sacrifice their life in order to help preserve and save their culture, their world, essentially. And it's so funny, and there's such a great mixture of action and characters and heart within the characters and just creativity, and the world building was absolutely beautiful. We're in this like beautiful, colorful land, and it was such a great story. I highly recommend you check out the premise for this because it was so good, and it was my favorite fantasy book of the year. And lastly, I think we're going to do sci-fi, and I have 2 picks for this. I couldn't decide between the 2. But the first one's going to be Kindred by Octavia Butler, and this is a time travel story. So we're following Dana, who is a young African-American woman living in San Francisco in the 1970s, which is kind of like our present time. But one day she's talking to her husband, and all of a sudden she passes out and she disappears, and she travels back in time to the antebellum South, like 200 years earlier or 100 years earlier. And she wakes up and she sees a child drowning. So she rushes over to save them, and then she gets transported back to her present day. So for whatever reason, this starts happening, and it starts happening more frequently, where she will start to feel woozy and she'll wake up and she's in the past again. So the problem is that she is an African-American woman back in this time period where you had to have papers to prove that you're free. So each time she travels back in time, she can't predict how long she's going to be there, and she keeps staying there longer and longer with each episode. And she seems to be linked with this kid, this white kid, who's the son of a plantation owner. So she essentially has to experience life as an enslaved woman because she can't escape these people, and she has no proof that, of who she is or where she came from. So we just see her and how she's able to survive and use her instincts and her intelligence to get herself out of these awful situations. And she has an amazing arc throughout the story, and it just comes together in this climax of action, and it's an incredible story. I highly recommend it, and I highly recommend the audio. It was really good, but this story was just such a great read for me. So lastly, we're going to come to my final pick, and this I think I might pick for my favorite book of the year, like number one, but honestly, all of them could fit this spot. But this is called Primitives by Erich Krauss, and this is a sci-fi sort of dystopian book of a medical/science thing gone terribly wrong. And we're following these two characters named Seth and Sara, and they are in this world where 30 years earlier, this great fatigue came over the entire human population, and the medical treatment they created to get rid of it had a horrible side effect, which ended up regressing the human brain back to a very primitive caveman-like state of being, even less than a caveman, like barely functionable. So we have these little pockets of human population that weren't affected by the vaccine, or they never took the vaccine actually. And then we have these huge tribes of primitive people scattered all over the world that are very violent. They're unpredictable. They can't communicate. They're just, dangerous, or so we think. And we're following Seth, who grew up with his adopted father in the deserts of Utah all by himself. He's never met another human being before. And then we have Sara, who grew up in a tiny little community of people that are trying to rebuild the human population, but it's very Divergent-esque in terms of everybody's assigned a job, they get arranged marriages, and she wants out of there. She just doesn't like it. Her parents have both passed away, and she just wants to escape. So together they sort of both go on these missions that lead them to the same place. And what I loved about this was that I really, really liked the characters. I liked how they were developed. They were so likable, so interesting and flawed and realistic. And then the action part of it was really cool. The whole story of what was happening and what they had to do was really amazing. It was a page turner from start to finish. The pacing was great. I mean, I did see some people critique this as maybe it could be looked at as like an anti-vaccine book because it came out around the time of COVID, but I didn't feel that way. I felt like the story was so much more than that. But it was just a really, really great book, and I absolutely loved it from start to finish. So those are my picks for my favorite books of the year. I hope I didn't miss anything. I don't know. It doesn't matter. That's enough to get you guys by with. But thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope you'll check out some of these books in the future. And if you've read any of them, I'd love to know if you enjoyed them as well. So thank you guys so much for watching. I really, really appreciate it. And I will talk to you guys soon in my next video. I hope you guys are having a wonderful week of reading, and I will talk to you guys soon.